I'm very pleased to have in the studio with me the co-founder and writer for the District Sentinel, districtsentinel.com, Sam Sachs, and former producer or whatever your title was, I don't know, for our TV show.
Producer, yeah.
We've collaborated on writing efforts. And,
Indeed.
And the crash of 2016.
And we still are.
We still are. There you go.
That's right.
And Sam, S-A-C-K-S, it's at Sam Sachs if you want to tweet him. By the way, I just tweeted out that weird graphic that showed his sensitive content. For those of you who follow me on Twitter, I'm just curious if you're seeing this. It was such a strange thing. I mentioned it in the last segment.
As someone who uses Twitter pretty frequently, I've never seen that before, so that is strange.
Yeah, this.
And I've seen pretty explicit material on Twitter and never have gotten warned before it just pops up on my newsfeed.
Right. Yeah, it's totally strange. Anyhow, District Sentinel, you walk the beat in D.C., so they don't have to. Or what's the official phrase?
In D.C., so you don't have to be.
There you go. Yep. So districtsentinel.com is the website, and what's the latest news?
So we've got a story up today about Puerto Rico, which is on the verge of defaulting on another payment today. I defaulted a few months ago on a smaller payment. This is roughly $400 million payment to creditors. The territory is roughly $70 billion right now in outstanding debt. It's having a real fiscal crisis right now. Congress...
Do you know what the annual GDP of Puerto Rico is?
I do not.
It would be an interesting number to know to measure against that.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah, I don't think it's quite that. Congress can help Puerto Rico in this situation by passing legislation that will allow the island to restructure its debts or to declare bankruptcy, which it currently doesn't have the power to do. But Congress this week is nowhere to be found, at least on the House. The House is out of session this week as Puerto Rico is dealing with this. There are a few proposals floating around right now that Republicans have put forward that would create sort of a payment advisory board that would sort of oversee how the island handles its finances. You think Greece, think what we've seen in Europe.
Think emergency manager in Flint.
Exactly. Think emergency managers in Flint. This would subject the island to likely even more pain than it's currently going through. And of course, Puerto Rico's problem has been exacerbated, like in all these other situations, as in Greece and some municipalities here in the U.S., by banks that have bought up a lot of this debt and now are charging fees on their debtors as a result.
And they bought up a lot of the debt at a big discount.
Exactly.
Because the assumption was that they would declare bankruptcy. And now those same people are running TV ads that we in the district here see every single night on whatever channel you look at that says, don't bail out Puerto Rico. And the reason why is because the hedge fund managers and the banksters, they want all the money.
They stand to lose, exactly. If they get maybe 50 cents or something on what they purchase, that would be a huge loss.
When they bought it on 30 cents on the dollar.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Great point. Another sort of underhanded thing Republicans are trying to do with this Puerto Rico rescue package. And just to be clear, there is no bailout here. None of these proposals involve U.S. taxpayer funds bailing out Puerto Rico. It involves Puerto Rico being allowed to restructure some of its debt payments in a reasonable fashion.
So the ads that use the word bailout are lies.
Of course, yes, they're lies. Another thing that Republicans are doing that's a bit underhanded for working people in Puerto Rico that are already struggling is they're trying to subvert minimum wage laws on the island. Currently, there's a carve-out for anybody who makes under $20 an hour, or under 20 years old, if they're allowed to make below $7.25 an hour. That's the federal minimum wage. It applies to Puerto Rico, too. They can be paid somewhere around $4 an hour, anybody who's under the age of 20. In a proposal Republicans have circulated around, they want to move that age to 25. So anybody under the age of 25 could be paid $4 an hour instead of $7.25 an hour. So typical disaster capitalism.
Right, the island's in trouble. Let's screw the millennials.
Interesting thing also about Puerto Rico is the Jones Act really affects what they can do there, because that prevents foreign flagged shipping vessels from going from one U.S. port to another U.S. port. So when boats are bringing goods to the U.S., they can't stop in Puerto Rico first and then go to the U.S., and they can't go to U.S. first and then Puerto Rico. They have to go to the U.S., and then the goods have to be put on a different shipping container and sent to Puerto Rico, which causes standard of living increases in the island as well. So far, none of the proposals look to address that aspect either.
Interesting.
So, and we've got those, as you said, we've got these ads.
How did Puerto Rico get into this, and how did they get $80 billion in debt?
Well, it's the same reason that a lot of these countries are in debt, from Europe to the United States, this global economic recession that's affecting poor nations as well as rich nations now. So they don't have quite the same sort of resources that the U.S. has in terms of being able to print money and pass a stimulus package to be able to deal with a lot of this stuff.
So when they're hit by a bad recession, if their unemployment rate goes from 4% to 12%, now they've got all these people that they've got to pay unemployment benefits to, and the equivalent of food stamps and all these other things. And at the same time, their tax base has collapsed, and because they don't control their own currency. It's not a sovereign nation. They can't just print money, and they use the U.S. dollar.
Yeah, which is why it's up on, why people are turning to Congress to be able to help the island restructure a lot of its debts. But it's very similar to a lot of countries we see over the last 10 years dealing with the recession and the struggles they faced. Another story over at the Sentinel, House Republicans are moving to weaken some more Dodd-Frank Wall Street reform laws. This involves swaps. So a swap is a deal between two investors, a financial instrument. It could be to hedge against price increases in the future. Let me give you an example. During the Wall Street crisis, 2008 financial crisis, investment firms held these tranches of exploding mortgages, and they did swap deals with insurance companies in case those things blew up. They'd get paid on them either way.
Right. Yeah, AIG was all over this stuff.
Right. So these are deals that you see throughout Wall Street. In fact, a study in 2010 found that more than $300 trillion worth of swaps are taking place on an annual basis, which is exponentially more than the global GDP. Just to show you
56 trillion.
Just how, so this is a pretty dangerously large market, and Wall Street. Bless you. The Wall Street reform law required that any swap houses that deal in more than $8 billion in swaps have to be subject to new transparency requirements. They have to show exactly what they're dealing with, how much they're moving, things like that, just so that regulators can get a better idea on this market. So the threshold was $8 billion with plans to move that threshold down to $3 billion. Any swap dealers who issue $3 billion every year would be subject to this. This rider that's attached to an agricultural appropriations bill that was passed out of the House last week would do away with that transparency requirement on firms that make $3 billion
let's
in
deregulate
swaps.
the banksters. After all, it worked out so well last time we did it.
Exactly. So, and we see Republicans using these spending bills, these really routine that every Congress has to do. That's your main job, is funding the government. We've seen Republicans again and again and again use these spending bills for ideological riders and ideological fights. And sometimes it's actually worked. In 2014, at the end of 2014, the Cromnibus spending bill had a bunch of deregulation for derivatives markets that succeeded. They tucked it into the Cromnibus bill, and Republicans and Democrats succeeded in passing it. So this might work.
Because it was must pass. We got a little less than a minute left, Sam. Anything else that's hot?
Just real quick, listeners should head to the District Sentinel. We've got a story coming up later this afternoon on this war that's starting to develop between inspectors general in the government and the agencies that they're overseeing. We've had a few flare-ups between the Department of Justice and its inspector general last year, and now we're seeing a new flare-up between the Department of Defense and the Inspector General for Afghan Reconstruction, a guy named John Sopko, who's been doing really aggressive work, and now he's getting a lot of pushback from a lot of anonymous sources at the Pentagon who are speaking to the media and speaking to senators and calling for investigations into Sopko, basically.
In other words, we don't want to have to justify where those hundreds of millions of dollars that went to Halliburton ended up.
Yeah, pretty much. And now that someone is trying to figure it out, let's get him out of his job, is what it sounds like.
Amazing. Sam Sachs, you can tweet him at Sam, S-A-C-K-S, or at the DC Sentinel. The website, of course, districtsentinel.com. Sam, thanks.
Thanks, Tom.
Great to have you with us.
To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.